Airport Literary Festival. This is our third virtual festival. And of course, we are so excited that you could join us. So now let me introduce our panelists. Jo Piazza is the national and international best-selling author of many critically acclaimed novels and nonfiction books, including Charlotte Walsh Likes to Win, The Knockoff, and How to Be Married. A former editor, columnist, and travel writer with Yahoo, Current TV, and the New York Daily News. Her work has also appeared in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, New York Magazine, Glamour, Elle, Time, Marie Claire, The Daily Beast, and Slate. She has an undergraduate degree in economics from the University of Pennsylvania, a master's from the Journalism School at Columbia University, and a master's in religious studies from NYU, New York University. She lives in Philly with her husband, Nick Astor, and 2 young children. Christine Pride is a writer, editor, and long-term publishing veteran. She held editorial posts at many different imprints, including Doubleday, Broadway, Crown, Hyperion, and Simon & Schuster. As an editor, she published many best-selling and critically acclaimed books with an emphasis on inspirational stories and memoir. She's now a freelance editorial consultant and does select editorial work and proposal content development, as well as teaching and coaching. She also pens a regular column, Race Matters, for Cup of Joe. You can reach her at christinepride.com or at cpride on Instagram. Last but not least, Lee Woodruff is the co-author of the best-selling book In an Instant, which garnered critical acclaim for the compelling and humorous chronicle of her family's journey to recovery following her husband Bob's roadside injury in Iraq. The couple has also founded the Bob Woodruff Foundation to assist wounded service members and their families, for which they have raised more than $80 million to date. She has also been a contributing reporter for CBS This Morning and Good Morning America, and her best-selling book, Perfectly Imperfect, A Life in Progress, was followed by her first novel, Those We Love Most. She currently runs a media speaker training business. Welcome to all 3 of you. Thank you so much for being here. And Lee, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Wow. I am so honored to be here, but we left the most important part out, which is that Christine Pride was my editor for my novel, and it was just a delightful experience, I have to say. Because yeah, so that's extra special. And then Jo,
she was my editor too, Lee.
Well, listen, we all love Christine.
Incestuous here.
We're having a total fest, and not that you need any more work, Christine, but she has an incredible eye, and she knows what makes a story. So I know that your business, I know that you probably have to turn people away, but that's amazing. But Jo, I got to just put a shout out for your podcast that I listened to, like eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, called Under the Influence, right?
Yes. Thank you. I'm so glad you're listening.
No, it's an amazing look at our crazy social media and influencer culture, which is only getting more rabid. So love that. Yeah. And I love that your husband just brought you coffee.
Yeah.
He brought me coffee, guys, and a tuna melt.
Oh my God. Husband of the year, Nick Astor.
That is a man. Yeah, let's do it. But let's talk about the book, because that's why we're here. So I want to hear before we talk about the book, I want to hear about your friendship first, because for anybody who doesn't know this, well, you must know, because this is obviously, we have the 2 authors here. This is a co-authored book, and oh my God, we have so much to talk about. So let me just shut up. Let's hear about how you guys first knew one another, how you met.
Yeah. I'll take this.
Meet cute, we call it.
We trade off telling our meet cute. So Christine, like I said, was my editor on my last novel, Charlotte Walsh Likes to Win, and we quickly became friends. Christine is the best editor that I've ever had, and she gets really close with her authors, and not all editors do. But there was also kind of this spark of like, oh, hey, I like you. We could go to dinner. We could eat French fries together. We could hang out. And we also worked really well together. We wrote, after we published Charlotte Walsh Likes to Win with Simon & Schuster, we also did a really quickie project for the TV show Younger. They had asked Christine to tap a writer to write a book related to the show called Marriage Vacation, based on a book they have on the show. And we had 4 weeks to do that. And the line between editor and writer gets real blurred when you've got 4 weeks to do anything. So it was really Christine and I in a Google Doc banging out this book, and we loved doing it. And afterwards, we wanted to find a way to work together again, also beyond the typical editor-writer relationship. And Christine had an idea kind of percolating for a novel. I think editors often do. They have ideas for books they want to see in the world. She didn't necessarily think she was going to be the one to write it, but she kind of proposed to me in December, January of 2017, 2018, with this idea, and I'll let her take it from there.
Yeah, it's funny because when as Georgia said, and you guys have known me for years, especially you, Lee. God, we go back,
We go back,
15
girl.
years now. It's crazy. But, it is part of the beauty of this business is matching people with ideas almost, right? Like you want to see the different kinds of books and stories, out there. And sometimes you have writers that you worked with for a long time and you say, how about this? How about that? Or you reach out to people about, an idea. But in this case, it really grew out of all of the horrible headlines that we just, feel like they come in these, awful waves of police violence. And in a period after, one of them, I just kept having this thought, which was, what would happen to a personal relationship of mine if that was a part of it, right? Like, I think we all love the kind of fiction where you can put yourself in the character's shoes and say, oh my God, what would I do? What would happen, right? How would that dilemma play out for me? And so the idea that there could be, a friendship between a Black woman and a white woman, like many of the friendships I have, I have a lot of Black friends, I have a lot of white friends. And what would happen if both of us were somehow involved, like had, stakes in this relationship or really hit close to home? And it seemed like a good way to delve into the topic in a really relatable, intimate, warm way, relative to the headlines and the news reports and all of that. But even more so as an editor, you're looking at a way to tell a story in a different kind of way. And the idea of collaborating with Jo presented that opportunity, right? It would be a very different book if I wrote it alone or she wrote it alone. But the idea that we could collaborate became a part of the story almost, and that the process of writing this book informed the book itself. And so it felt like such a unique opportunity to do something meaningful and different. And so we jumped on it.
And jump you did. So to me, like to have this nascent idea around what was happening in the larger social construct, and after the murder of George Floyd, and as you said, add to that. Hard to watch, hard to see for everyone. When did you begin putting the pieces together? And of course, I'm going to ask about the writing process, because I feel like I heard something from you way back when, and I won't blow it. But when did you begin thinking, okay, we'll make this protagonist a journalist, because therein she would have to cover, like, that is a very clever way to put the story together. So how fast did you come up with the architecture of what this was going to look like?
We came up with the bones of the book, the outline of the book pretty quickly. So we knew, we've gone back to try. Christine remembers dates better than I do. I can remember nothing. I'm like, time has no meaning anymore.
The pandemic kind of did that.
The pandemic did that. I've had a ton of kids in the past 5 years. So I have no idea what year it is. But I know we started writing in early 2018. And very, very quickly, we knew both the title of the book, and we knew a lot about our main characters. It came to us real fast, as did the initial plot line for the story. And, we like to talk about how it was 2018 because it was pre-George Floyd, and there were so many shootings already in the news that the world had taken note of, but not like they did in 2020. And a lot of these horrific acts were still often dismissed, but we were seeing them. And because I'm in the media, Christine's in publishing, so you've been seeing a lot of the mothers of victims writing memoirs. And also as a Black woman, she can't turn away from this. So we knew, and I don't even remember how we came up with the fact that Riley, our Black character in the book, was a journalist. She just was from the very beginning. She was a journalist, and her best friend, Jen, who was a white woman, was married to a cop who was involved in a police shooting of an unarmed Black teenager. And we knew that Riley would always be the one covering the story. And for me as a journalist, I was so intrigued by this topic for a lot of reasons, but one, because I have seen how the media treats police shootings and treats shootings in general. We don't cover it well enough. There's not nearly enough empathy or humanity. There's a lot of clickbait headlines and not a lot of depth. And I wanted to show in this book, it was a chance to show all different aspects of the story, to show the, Black, the white, the gray, like all of the different areas and the nuances in this story. And so we start with a robust outline. We have to. I do not write with an outline when I'm writing on my own. I really just like sit down and just start typing. Christine loves an outline so much. And every time I say that, she freaks out, especially because we're like 2 chapters away from our next book. And she's like, really wish you'd stick to that outline, Piazza.
I love an outline. It's nice to have a plan.
You're an editor, of course you do.
Yeah,
Yes.
No, I have no plan, but you can't write a book with another person without an outline. So we knew exactly where we were going. And then we worked in a Google Doc, which while I accepted Christine's need for an outline, she accepted my need for a Google Doc. And that was our first fight, right?
That's a good compromise, guys. But into that, I'm still, sorry, no.
Go ahead.
Well, really quick question, then I want to hear, maybe you can answer this then. Did you know where it ended? Or was part of the tension between, I need an outline and I'd rather just keep writing and see where it goes? Maybe I'm jumping the gun here on that question, because I'd love to hear about how you felt about the collaboration.
Yeah, even in writing an outline, I think that things might change or shift as you go, but we really needed this plan, not only, because it would give us a roadmap when we were writing together, but because this book was a little bit harder to plot since it was 2 characters that go back and forth in first person point of view, and we needed some plot points to happen at particular chapters, right? And so that isn't something, it's almost like putting together a puzzle. You can't, sort of fly by the seat of your pants with that. You kind of have to know when the major things are happening. But the other reason we were so kind of adamant about it is because, part of our process was that we made this decision early on, was that we were going to both write both characters. A lot of people, make the assumption, which is reasonable, that, I wrote all the Black characters, the Black woman, and Joe wrote the white character, Jen is the white woman. But we didn't want to do that, partly because we were really worried that the book would read in a really disjointed way, read like 2 people wrote it almost, because each writer has their own kind of style. And so the voices would be different, but also the style would be different. But not only that, we both, as much as this book is about race, and we chose to collaborate because we wanted to bring our individual experiences and perspective to the table, but it's also about a lot of bigger universal themes of friendship and motherhood and ambition and, family. And so we both felt like we had contributions to make, and for both characters. And so the lines were very then blurry there in terms of, our making, our writing, both chapters or both characters all the way through.
Well, I was lucky enough to get a galley copy and feature it in my blog. And so after I read it, while I was reading it, I was emailing Christine and sending messages to Joe, because I was also listening to her podcast and kind of falling in love with her too. She doesn't know that I have a girl crush on her, but now she does. now everybody knows. And I was like, okay, how did you do this? And you had said to me, we both decided to throw in with our voices and make this composite. And I thought that was fascinating, because to me, it would have been so much easier for you to say, okay, let's each take a character. In fact, let's stand in one another's shoes and try to write, which is what I originally assumed you had done until I asked you that question. I thought you would each, through your friendship and your knowledge, try to tackle being the other person. And so I thought the composite thing was kind of brilliant, but that also had to have created a lot of extra work in some ways.
Extra work, but also I think we did end up doing it the way you described. It was just more than off the page that we were having those conversations, right? Like we did have to we did have to have the stand-in conversations almost, right? Like these conversations about race that are then unavoidably personal, right? This is my perspective. These are my experiences. This is what I've heard or, seen in the world, and vice versa. And we just did that kind of offline and then brought all that to the page. And some of it was, beautiful kumbaya kind of moments in the story. And then some of it was born of a lot of conflict and friction and miscommunication off the page that was also then in the story. And both were in a weird way beneficial, right? And also both were unavoidable in a process like this and in a topic like this, right? Like trying to write together with its creative challenges, like that's just something that you're always going to have to navigate in a collaboration. But then also having to have, conversations about one of the most hot button and fraught issues, maybe the most hot button and fraught issue, in our society. And as relatively new friends, meaning that we hadn't had all of these conversations yet. Like we had started talking about, family and boys and whatnot. That was a very short conversation on my part, but we hadn't, gotten into like the nitty gritty of a lot of these conversations that, we all struggle to have, frankly.
There must have been a gift in that though, because in the book, the two friends grow up together, like they know one another from previous lives. So, and that actually was fascinating in that it had its own sort of sense of, what are the back brain ways that our friendship grew up and took root and planted, and what were the assumptions that we'd made as friends. And that I think is explored so beautifully and so in such a layered way in the book. Like that's not fruit forward if it were a wine, but it's baked through all of that. Is like, wow, we need to sort of rip the stitching apart on our friendship because this big thing has happened and we're looking at it two different ways. So I thought that was brilliant. And then I, in looking at the book, of course, race is an issue. It is the third rail issue of this damned country. And who can believe we're still talking about it the way we are in 2022? Sad. But what I loved about this book is race became, the story became a way to think, talk, and look at race by standing in someone else's shoes. But the book to me is about friendship and family. And that's, of course, what makes a novel so beautiful, is to be able to do that. It's not eat your peas and beat you over the head with that. So when you set out to do this big audacious thing and write a book that had racism and questioning how we conduct ourselves through every aspect of it, how did you make sure it didn't sound too didactic? Like, did you have someone else as a third reader kind of going, girls, this is a little too obvious, you need to make this dialogue or something? Who was your editor, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, we had about a dozen people, honestly. We had so many readers because from the start, we didn't want this to be didactic. And you saying that means so much, Lee, because that's exactly, you just said exactly what we wanted to do. I mean, we can just, I feel like we can drop the mic now. That's what we did.
You did. I mean, if no one heard me, and I'm going to say this again, this is a compelling novel. Like, I did not want this to end. And I gave this to a bunch of friends, and they were all captivated by the story. And I know from social media, so were so many people, from Deb Roberts to everyone on down. So we'll talk about that in a second. But sorry, Joe, I just wanted to underscore for everyone who hasn't put a question in the chat or Q&A and wants to ask, do that. And if you haven't read this book, We Are Not Like Them, then go out and grab it. I was thinking I had it here, but I don't know. I was going to do a little Oprah thing.
Yeah, and it's so funny, and I don't have it handy either. I'm in the other room, like, follow me.
I know. Okay, we need to hold up the cover, but I just wanted to do the show the leg for Joe, and now you may continue. Yes.
And so, first, to answer the question, we had each other, which was a big deal. You know, we couldn't, neither of us could get too up in our heads or let it get preachy or didactic at any point, because we had each other kind of as just a check and balance system, which is an amazing part of the writing process that you don't normally have when you're writing on your own, because no one else is as invested as you are. But then we also had people reading our books that were not necessarily our closest friend readers. We had asked some of the police officers that we'd interviewed to read the book, some of the police wives, people that we wanted to make sure we were giving accurate representation in the book. And then we had a very diverse group of readers too. We had white readers, we had Black readers, male readers, female readers, because I think everyone was bringing a different kind of perspective to the table. And I like to say that there is a multiverse of versions of this book because we tried everything. We took every bit of advice and criticism so seriously. We're like, okay, great. Yeah, we're going to go with that and see if that works. There's so many different ways that this could have gone. But I loved what you said about how this is a book about love and friendship, because that was always our goal. Yeah. And particularly female friendship, which Christine and I want to see more of on the page. We read so much about romantic love, and I don't think we read enough about the friendships that truly sustain us, that are oftentimes longer than a marriage, and that are different and sustain us differently than a marriage. And we wanted to show that kind of lifelong friendship between Jen and Riley in this book.
And we also knew, Lee, that they were the people. We live in such a society now where people are just quick to make snap judgments and opinions about everything, and books are included in that. So even before reading this story, we knew people would see the kind of log line or what the book was about, and then might assign an agenda to us, or might assume that we had an agenda of some sort, right? And like without even reading a page, like, oh, these people want to say this, Y, Z, or vilify these people or whatever. And so that was motivating us in terms of like, sometimes as a writer or an editor, you're thinking about the audience for a book, and you want to think about the audience that you're trying to write to, but you also want to think about the audience that might have fault with the book. And like, if you can win over that audience, or have them say, oh, I never thought about it that way, or once I read it, I was surprised, right? That's what, we were trying to get to. And so in avoiding being didactic or having such strong moral agenda, or trying to, demonize people, we really were thinking of those readers, like how would they react to this? And so it's our real, one thing that gives us a lot of gratification is when people do say, I identified with people in the story that I didn't think I was going to identify with, like whatever that may be in the cross section, right? And so that's when we feel like we've, really done our job.
I think your book is a testament to the edict that if you write a great story, people will come. And it is a really great, it is a universal story. I mean, really, Shakespeare nailed all the themes, right? There's nothing new on the block. He got out there early and grabbed them all. But this is friendship and love, and a riveting story. And that's at the heart of it all. So you could do whatever you wanted at the back end and get those messages through, but it's really the back end. It's that tension that makes the book such a compelling read. It adds that extra dimension. It takes it out of the girlfriend conflict, what have you, because it adds this really rich element. Okay, the question everyone wants to know, and Joe, you alluded to it, or maybe Joe did, or maybe Christine did a little bit, like your first fight. Like, was there, what for each of you was the moment when you were like, this is a deal breaker, like this character has to do this?
There were a few of them.
How could there not be? Yeah. How could there not?
No. I mean, it's funny because I was reflecting this morning as I was attempting to run a really long road race. Pregnant,
by the way, guys. She's pregnant.
Yeah.
And her husband's delivering food, and she ran a race this morning. I mean, really? What don't you do, Joe? What don't you do?
I don't make my own coffee or sandwich.
Feel better.
About it because, like I said, Christine and I are working on this new book together, and I was thinking about there's a lot more time invested in writing a book with another person, because you have to give space for the other person to both do and think, and you also kind of have to be a mind reader a little bit too. It's like, what's she gonna say when I say this, and how should I respond in a comment before she reads it, so that she knows to accept it, right? That's like almost an explanation. And we've gotten good at that. We're still not perfect, right? Like, we still struggle. We're still really like pushing through the end of this new book. But that was a process that happened over 3 years now. It was not like that in the beginning. We could not read each other's minds. So I think our first big conflict for me was in a very early draft of the book. Riley, who is our Black journalist character, came across as very, very perfect on the page, just no flaws at all. And love a flawed character. I just do. Also, it's more interesting, right? The people like,
and we're all flawed, right?
and we're all
Yeah.
flawed. It's more human. It's more relatable. And I started thinking about the kinds of flaws that I've given my female characters in the past, particularly Charlotte Walsh, who was a rich tech executive running for Senate in Pennsylvania. And, Charlotte had had a rough upbringing. Her parents were divorced. Her brother was a drug addict. She'd had a teenage pregnancy. All of these things that just made her like a more complicated human being. And I start throwing out suggestions. And Christine said, no, I don't want to put those kinds of tropes on Riley because they're tropes that are often put on a Black woman. And my last character was a white woman. I didn't see it that way. I kept pushing back. I'm like, this isn't about race. This is about, giving her things to overcome. And Christine very rightly said, she's already had a lot to overcome as a Black woman who was the first woman in her first person in her family to go to college, and usually the only in so many of these spaces, and trying to push her way up in the news industry, which is such an all-white industry. She's got all of these challenges already. And that was when I had to shift my perspective. It was a really big shift. It was very easy for me to be like, it's not about race, it's not about race, which comes up so many times. It's about race, right?
And we say it even, I mean, that made its way into the book, and Riley's conversation where it's like, it's always about race. But I mean, I think in these conversations, that's what happens, right? It's like, I mean, a lot of the ways that they're so, that can be like feel cliche and reductive because the same things come up a lot, and that is just a common one, but worth, like you describe something and somebody says it's not about race, and then it is about race, right? And that tension is what is at the bedrock of a lot of racial miscommunications.
Well, that was kind of the coolest point of the book for me, was the recognition that that Riley was sort of like, this has just been invisible to you. Like we don't call this race. You don't think of it as race. And maybe I don't either, because this is just all I've ever known. But now this thing that just happened, and I'm involved in covering it, and your husband is involved in being there, this has sort of ripped open the fault lines. And I thought that was brilliant, because that's the, the quote unquote racist in all of us, the assumptions we make about people, that just because Riley came from a wealthier family and went to college and has these great career ambitions, that her life has been easier. So.
And also that that if you don't talk about these things, then that is what allows these assumptions to, really take root and grow. And because they had such a long friendship, meeting as little girls, they didn't have the experience or the muscle, the familiarity to talk about this, because it didn't matter when they met. And so then they never kind of developed it. And that's kind of the big blind spot in their friendship. Whereas if they had met as adults, obviously their friendship would be completely different, and who knows what they would have connected on, or if they would have connected at all. But certainly they would have been more aware that race was like a factor in each of their lives, right? The same way that when Joe and I came together, we, it's a very different experience. If we met at 5 versus now, we knew that there was, we had different experiences, and we also were hyper aware that we need to talk about those experiences, both to be friends and to write a book. And I think that that's important too, right? Like if we never decided to do a book project, but we were going to be friends. This is something that kind of grew out of the conversation or the intense conversation that Joe and I had about, this is always about race, because we went on to talk about the fact that if we can't talk about these things without it being fraught or, contentious, then that's not only going to impede the progress of our book, but that's going to really impede our friendship, right? If you're going to have a close friendship, you have to be able to talk about these things. And, that's a lesson that Riley and Jen have to learn as well.
Yeah. I'm still blown away by what you said, that you took all those perspectives in, because that is the hardest part to me of the editing process. It's like, okay, I've got to tune out Uncle Nelson's comments. His don't count here. And so Wow, I'm still kind of struck on that. Maybe that's too granular for this conversation because I want to get to your new book and I want to get to any questions that anybody might have. Let me just double check. People are being very passive today on a Sunday. Maybe it's because
Sunday. People are just
Yeah, they're sipping their coffee and
no, and we got plenty of questions here.
Yeah.
I'll just tell you that. But just synthesizing all of that feedback and then taking it across characters by gender, race, and age, like that's a lot.
It was a lot, but I think that because Joe had written so many books, and because I had edited so many books, I think we had the skill set, the muscle, and the openness, right, to be able to take in a lot of different feedback. Because part of being a great writer, as you well know, Lee, is as a great writer yourself, is to get the story down, right, and then part of it, and that's can be raw talent and discipline and all those things, but really part of being a writer is responding to feedback and editing and responding in a productive way, but also in a taking out all the emotions in the process and all of the other stuff that's churning to be objective about your work and your goals and what you're trying to do, and so we really had to be very clear-headed about that, particularly when you're writing a book about such a complicated topic or a fraught topic where you are going to get feedback that is potentially offensive, or we had an early reader of an early white reader say that like Riley's character wasn't Black enough, for example, so when you're
A white reader said that.
They sure did.
Yeah. So, I mean, to your point about, you're going to get all kinds of feedback and we're open to it. When you're writing a book about race, that leaves things open for off base feedback. It's like a little bit meta, right? Like you're writing a book about race and then living the reactions and the tensions of a book about race in real time as an actual human being, right? And so we had to deal with a lot of that too.
Well, you navigated that beautifully. So for each of you, pick a character, because sometimes these characters, and Joe said it, and Christine, you've lived it, in writing something from scratch, some character comes in that you just thought was going to be like in the third string somewhere. And yet they really have this life breathed into them, and maybe they could be a larger part of that. So for each one of you, name a character that wasn't a feature character that you would have loved to have developed further, or could have their own book.
Great question. Yeah.
It's a great question. We think about this a lot because we're in the process of trying to develop this as a TV show. And that will give us the space, obviously, to bring more of these secondary characters to light and show their backstory. I am fascinated by the mothers in the book. I would love to see a little, I'm very curious about Cookie and how Cookie got to where she is and how she became the person that she is with the views that she has. She's very similar to a lot of the women that I grew up with in Northeast Philadelphia, in the suburbs up there. They have a point of view. They've lived in a very sheltered world. They've chosen to continue living in this very sheltered, cloistered world. And they just have a very narrow worldview. Whether or not that is something chosen or something that has been, kind of put upon them by like how they were raised and who they chose to marry. And so just kind of seeing how Cookie developed into who she is, because for all of her flaws in the book, and this is Kevin the cop's mom, she loves her kid. She loves her kid, and she would do anything for him and anything for his family. And it was very important for Christine and I to give every character that moment of connection and empathy with the reader, no matter if you agreed with them and their views. But we wanted everyone to have a moment where you're like, okay, I feel you. I can feel this. Every single character, except for one. The repository of everyone's ire here. And that is Kevin's brother, Matt. There's nothing redeeming about Matt in this book.
No.
We needed Matt to be like, we were being so careful and balancing everybody. We needed one character that was just like, we can put all of our feelings.
Matt was a human bile duct. Right?
Yes.
He was
human bile duct. That's a great way of putting him. And also Jen's mom, Lou, who also at first glance seems terrible in so many ways, but then you're like, she was a teenage mother and she had to struggle a lot. And so, yeah, those characters for me, I would like to develop more, in addition to Sean, Riley's brother, who I think you might say.
That's who
Forgot
I was
about
gonna
Sean.
say. Yeah.
Okay.
And that he's come up a lot, both in the, kind of fan favorites, like when people ask about other characters in the book. And then as Joe mentioned in, the TV development, thinking about characters that we could give more airtime and story time to. And Sean keeps coming up because, I mean, I'm also very interested in the idea of people who are born in the same house or forged in the same family unit, but then come out very differently. I mean, I think that's so interesting with siblings. And so, they are so close, but they are Sean and Riley, but they are also so different. And we tease at those differences a little bit in the book, but I think it would be interesting to see more of that.
Well, and also, and let's talk about the TV script if you're able to, but also you can do so much more in the acting world with that, just through a look or body language, or like he rolls his eyes at her or something like, that.
Yeah.
So, okay, come on. Really? It's optioned for something. And this is exciting. Tell us what you're allowed to or can talk about.
Yeah. So it's been optioned. We have a star for Riley. I don't think we can talk about it yet. And we have a studio, and we like finished the showrunner process. And
so the script is done?
No.
Oh, okay.
But we're just about to start the pitching process. And as always, we have a very robust outline in our heads.
Well, of course we do, because we know who's in charge of that.
We plan.
Yeah, there's a plan. And the next step is to pitch the networks, and then we'll start writing the pilot. And Christine and I are writing the pilot. That much we already know, and we're really, really just crazy excited to see. I mean, our goal with this book was to start a conversation. And writing it, as you said in the beginning, was such a gift because it forced me to have conversations I never would have. Not just writing the book with Christine, but through all of the book events that we've done with literary festivals, with bookstores, with libraries. Something comes up every time that just like blows your mind. And it's easy not to have those moments in life. It's easy to go through life without having those. And what we're hoping is that with the TV show, we can reach so many more people and make the conversation even bigger and wider, and just help people develop the muscle of talking about race in a way that doesn't constantly feel terrible and stressful and negative
and guilty. And how do I enter this? And how do I open this? I think as a TV show, this will be brilliant because we all love to talk about what we're watching.
And I think that you could talk about something what's been beautiful, and we've seen it in the events, is you could talk about something then personal, but not open with that, right? So the book is a tool, so you're talking about the characters, but then it's an easier and nice organic pivot to be like, well, I had this experience, or I had that experience, or it made me think of this or that, which is like the beauty of fiction, no matter what, right? This is just like a helpful way into, like, where it's harder. You're not going to go like, did you see that New York Times headline yesterday? Wow, that's brutal. I mean, it's like a little harder to get that out of the water cooler. This is, just a warmer way in. And the fact that people then share their personal experiences in book clubs and what I mean? Joe and I have been so eager to do all these events because it's, something interesting and enlightening comes out of all of them. And what's really been interesting is, it's hard to, in this day and age in publishing, we're making lots of strides in the industry in terms of, audience outreach and having more diverse voices and so forth, but books are still kind of marketed with one audience in mind, right? And book publishing itself is kind of segregated in the audience. Like, this is a book for white women, this is a book for Black women, this is a book for queer people, this, and we really wanted to break that down with this book and have it, be a true diverse audience. And so when we're at book clubs, granted, the book clubs are actually still pretty segregated, right? Like, we're still doing Black book clubs and white book clubs, but we are doing both.
And old book clubs and young book clubs.
Yep. You still have those Northeast Philly ladies that are hanging together, reading the book at the same time from the neighborhood. Yeah.
Yep, and the Long Island ladies.
Yeah. Oh, they are fierce readers, those Long Island
Yeah,
ladies.
they
Yeah.
are. They're great. Yeah.
So let's talk about the book reception.
Mhm.
You guys had a really good, like, it's hard today. There's a lot out there. There's a lot coming out there, but I know, and you guys worked that skirt, as my grandmother would say.
Oh, I love that.
Oh, I
But
love that. I want to
that's
start saying that.
you did. You showed
My new
leg, you were
favorite expression.
dancing. Yeah, you were
Love
getting it
it.
all done. But so talk about it, because I feel like it really did break through. It obviously broke through. There's interest in so many places, but did you guys in fact become what could have ended up being, in some cases, like a biracial therapist couch, where everybody did kind of imbue you with their story and this, and they kind of want you to tell them it's okay, and
Definitely.
talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love it.
Christine, how many times do you think I've said, I just have to say, as a white woman,
Yeah.
I'm scared of talking about race too. I didn't want
I'd have $1 million if you said
Right.
$1 every time you said it.
Tiptoeing into the conversation, right?
Yeah. We prepared ourselves for every possible reaction to this book. We knew we were putting a book out about race in a time when, putting anything out into the world can be fraught, right? And we've been so just honored that the reception has been so kind and welcoming and open. And we can't say enough about being chosen as the Good Morning America Book Club pick, because like you said, we are in a world of peak content. There's too much content out there. You can stream, you can TikTok, you can listen to podcasts, and there's a gazillion books and a gazillion magazines. And so Good Morning America, it was an honor, but it also helped us cut through that noise, so that people could find us, because it's hard to find books. And we just getting to go on air and talk to Deborah Roberts, who, and we're so glad it was her, because she had such a connection with the book and a connection with Riley, our journalist character. She was actually like, did you talk to Al about like my early coming up as a journalist? She's like, because I see so much of myself in here. And, I think we all almost cried during that interview, and it really helped us to find readers and connect with readers. And that's what we've been wanting to do. So yeah, we feel really great about how this book is living in the world. And also the fact that book clubs are picking it up now. The book's been out for 7 months.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, we every day, not a day goes by that we don't get a message from a book club saying they're reading it right now.
Yeah.
So
that's going to continue to happen. Is it paperback yet?
August.
Okay. Well, then you'll get another delicious,
Yeah.
pump there. We actually have a question from Deb Sabo. I might have said your name wrong. Deb is sipping coffee, and we love that, Deb. I need to get some coffee.
Cheers, Deb.
And Deb is asking, I get the advantages of a larger audience and more character development, but what, if anything, might be lost in transferring from book to screen? That's a great question.
That is a great question. Wow.
Yeah. It could be everything, Deb.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. We've all loved a book that turned into a TV show we didn't like.
But that's not going to happen here, because you guys have control over it.
You know what I think that we were most concerned about and want to be mindful of? The same way we were really mindful that we didn't want this to be like a morality tale, and we did have a lot of complexity and so forth in writing the book. I mean, definitely that same mindset going into a TV show, but I think in TV, it's the fault line to cheesy is that's a very slippery slope, right? Where it's almost too treacly or over sentimental. And I think we want to balance this idea that we want just as we did with the book, we want it to be warm and heartfelt and emotional, not brittle and caustic in terms of the subject. So we want that emotional landscape, but we don't want it to be overly simplified in terms of the kumbaya moments. Each episode is like, everybody is just comes to a racial understanding at the end. That's, I think, tricky. And I think it's so interestingly, it's tricky because that's a lot of times what people want. So I could see getting lots of notes, from network executives and the like saying, you know, there's so much negativity out there, let's make the show warm. And that's something that's a dilemma that's really been embodied in our Jen character a little bit,
Yeah.
in terms of, you know, people want to see sometimes a lot more growth than is actually realistic for anybody, even a character in a book over the course of, you know, our story is 3 months long. And I think, you know, as a society, we want this like redemption and turnaround. And then in the end, the characters learn all the lessons and live all, you know, happily ever after. And we had to really fight against that because it's not
reality. Yeah.
Yeah. And that would really cheese it up, honestly.
Yeah,
So I hope
sure.
that, I mean, there can be one small step forward somewhere.
Yep.
I know we have another question, but what occurred to me when you were talking, Christine, was I don't know how many people watch Station 11. Is it
Yeah.
Hilary St. Mandel's adoption of her book?
Yeah.
And you know, some people were like, I don't want to watch that about a pandemic, during a pandemic, or what have you. It's too close to home, which some could potentially think, oh, I don't need, you know, another story about this.
Yeah.
But what I thought was so brilliant about that story, it certainly didn't end with like the planet was healed and everything was great, but you can put optimism into a story without tying it up in a bow. And that is going to be the trick here for you guys, but it's not, you're going to nail that one. All right, Paulette, thank you for writing a question. I'm curious if the TV show will be expanding on the characters, or will the show be placed in other times before or after the book? And so be bringing in more characters and storylines. Wow. Maybe there'll be a season 4.
Do you want to come to our writer's room, Paula?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Let's brainstorm, Pam.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, hopefully, like our goal is to do 2 things: to shift backwards in time a little bit, to show how a character was formed, how their opinions were formed, right? I don't think we mind people enough or think enough about how they came to be the person they are today. I would love to see more of Gigi growing up too. She's Riley's grandmother, and just, you know, watching how she became the woman that she is, who everyone loves and respects so much, would be great. But then we also want to show shifts in perspective. So how does Jen see this situation? How does Riley see this situation? Because anyone will have a different perspective on a situation, but when race is involved, you're absolutely going to have a different perspective on the situation. And we think that that is what will really get viewers talking. It's like, oh, I actually can see this through eyes that I had not been able to see it through before. So
Okay, I just saw that for you guys. I saw the scene happens, and then there's a really quick rewind, like literally, and then it goes from the other character's perspective, kind of like The Affair. Who watched
The Affair?
Yeah, we think about The Affair a lot. Yeah.
Love that. All right, Paulette, like that answer. She says sounds wonderful. So I think you need to go.
All right,
Yeah.
we're on the right track.
She's in your writer's room, and she loved that one. I know we only have 10 minutes left, but are we able to talk about the next book? Just can you give us a little tease about what that's about?
Talk all about it. Yeah.
So it's called You Were Always Mine, and it is the story of a Black woman in a small town in the South who, as the novel opens, finds an abandoned white infant. And when she takes in this infant, it upends her life as she knows it. Really, there's, you know, a lot of people, including her partner, who have feelings about her having this white child, and then we learn of a connection with the birth mother and the birth mother's family, who then want to make a claim on this baby, who are all white. And then in doing so, you know, gets into questions of, you know, who belongs to who and who has the right to be a mother to who. And, you know, as with We Are Not Like Them, one of our goals was to show characters and dynamics that flip the most common tropes in their head. Like, as you alluded to earlier, Lee, the idea that, you know, Riley's family is the one that has more resources than Jen's family, and Jen, you know, usually we see the white savior trope, but in this case, Riley's family was a haven for Jen. And so similarly in this book, it's this idea of, you know, we see white families take in Black and brown children all the time. What happens in the reverse when that is so rare? And, you know, there are reverberations to that, particularly in the South. So
I'm already
are
all in. I'm all in on this. This is
two
this is-
chapters to the end of our first draft. So wish us luck as we get to our finish line here.
and kind of like the Hardy Boys, you're now kind of developing your own gestalt for your titles too, because
Yes,
they sound like
it's true.
sentences that would come out of people's mouths, right?
Yeah,
You're not like
lots of
them.
pronouns, lots of
You were
pronouns.
always mine. Love that. Love that. Let's talk about the title for a sec in We Are Not Like Them. Did you have that first? Did that come out somewhere? I can't remember if it's in the book. It must be a line somebody says at one point.
It is not. I
It's
know
not,
that it is
okay.
not, because usually I do love when the line is in the books. I'm always like reading that, as a reader or an editor, like trying to like, oh, maybe, put it in. It's not directly in there. But we felt like it just kind of stood alone.
And it says everything, right? Because nobody thinks that they're the racist. It's somebody else. So of course we've been friends since childhood. How could we possibly have racist glasses, either one of us? Yeah, no, I thought that was brilliant. And
or
by the way,
anything. That's our society now. Like, we don't do this, they do this.
They're vaccinated, they're not vaccinated. Like,
whatever.
Yeah, we're against them. We're so tribal right now, that it's hard for people. Race obviously is really the third rail in our society. It's hard to talk about, but it's become difficult to talk about anything. The identity politics are so strong. And we wanted to push against that. Christine is the one that came up with this title. I give her all the credit for it.
Suddenly, like in the, I can't remember if I'm in the shower or is it like in the middle of the night, but it was like a, oh my God moment where I ran to Amazon to see, is this title been taken? Which I was kind of surprised that it wasn't. And as you know, Lee, from, writing.
Well, I was just going to say, you're the one that did my title. Like, you're kind of the title queen, whether you know it or not.
That's so funny. Yeah. Because I actually,
you had the title.
It's so hard, but I do.
Hard.
Yeah.
You're good at it though. That's what you do for a living. What didn't I ask you? Let me see if anybody else has. What do you guys want to talk about? What's the question you love getting that I didn't ask you?
We covered a lot, honestly.
Yeah. Sometimes people ask what surprised us about writing the book or its reception. And for me, and I only mention it because it's so, well, there are two things and they're both equally shocking. One is that it's really hard to write a book. I know you guys both knew this very well. I really underestimated how hard it is, even with another person. It is very, sharing the labor. It is still very, 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 very hard to do. So there's that. But two, we knew that we had to create this tension between Riley and Jen based on the fact that they had not had these conversations. And I have to say, in writing the book and coming into it, even though I knew dramatically we needed this, as somebody who'd always talked to their white friends about race, it really strained my own personal credulity almost that they hadn't had these conversations, because I've had friends since first grade, in a Rising Gen kind of way where we always talked about it. And then in publishing this book and having so many of these conversations, people tell us over and over again, I have, a Black husband or Black children, or I was married to a person of another race for years, or my best friend, or whatever it is. And we have not talked
about
directly. And that's just,
wow.
It was a very, very, very surprising, the number of people who are in cross-racial relationships. Like, I kind of knew, maybe people in their separate corners were not talking about race, right, within that group. But yeah, it's been really surprising, but also heartening in that people want to do it, right? So people are expressing that they want to do it, they haven't done it, and this book is helping them. And so that's
just such a
that's really
thing.
wonderful.
But now I'm really curious. How was it, do you think, that you were having all these conversations as you were growing up? Were you starting them?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I think a lot of it was me starting them. I'd always talked about race, but I think it is I'll speak for myself personally. I think it is a little bit of a litmus test to bring up race early and fluidly, right? And then judge somebody's reaction. And that actually is more, it's a little bit like the chicken or the egg in terms of saying then, is this a relationship then ripe for real friendship, right? I mean, Joe and I always talk about this idea of, you can have your pedicure friends, or, you go get a drink with friends. But if you're going to get to the next level of intimacy in a friendship, whatever that is, and even if it's cross racial or whatever, you have to have a certain level of vulnerability, and you have to, have an openness of what's on the table, and that's something that you're feeling out from the beginning. So I think I wouldn't be able to have close friendships with somebody who I wasn't having these conversations with, so they'd be weeded out. Yeah. Does that make sense? You know what I mean?
Well, it's so fundamental.
Yeah.
That you'd have to, if you were going to be that friend from the heart, the friend that you call when the times are tough, which is that I think of, those are the core girlfriends.
Absolutely. The 3 a.m.
And you have to acknowledge, you have to sort of say, hey, let's talk about this thing. We were raised with different, what is it like to be you? And let me tell you what it's like to be me. Yeah.
Right. And so in this case for Riley and Jen, it was race that they hadn't really talked about, but it is still universal that they're things in friendships, right? The elephants in the room, or the thing you don't feel comfortable talking about, or you're not going to go there, or you're not going to share. That is often the block or the impediment to a true intimacy, right? So, it's been really meaningful to also talk about that more broadly in friendship. Like, what do we talk about with the people that we love, and what do we hide from them? What are we willing to share? How vulnerable are we willing to be? And to get people thinking about that in their own relationships is also really meaningful for us.
Yeah.
I mean, can you guys believe that an hour just passed?
No,
I feel like I've been just sitting and
well, I had to take a pause to fangirl, to say in reverse, to say, Lee, we're so grateful that you took the time to have this conversation. And I've been a fan of yours for a zillion years. I love you so much. I respect your work so much. And so this was a real
I don't know how long ago I wrote my novel, and it's time to pull the other thing out and dust it off, but too much work is happening. But I will tell you my story about meeting Christine Pride, which is, what was it, like 10 years ago? So, I mean, you're still, both of you are still super young. You're still, you're still having children. So I could be their grandmother, essentially. So I'd been talking to her on the phone, and then I meet her, and I was just like, you hear somebody's voice and you're so articulate. So, but you didn't sound young. So when she wheels around the corner, here's this, like, I don't know, gorgeous 20 something. And I'm thinking, my book is about marriage and like old people being married and infidelity. And I'm thinking, is she going to be able to edit this from the perspective of like somebody in their, mid 40s heading into this horrible part? And damn if she wasn't. Like, you just show up, girl.
Oh,
and so I'm fangirling right back.
Beautiful, but what but as we've been talking about universal themes, I mean, your book about this beautiful family is full of just universal themes, and that's when you write a great story, when it's like, it's not the ages, characters, the race, wherever they're from. It's about their connections to each other on the page and the emotions of that. And, so.
But one would make assumptions that if one had not lived that life, and that is just not a fair assumption, right? You watched it all around you. You grew up in a family and everything else. So it was just, that was my moment of assumption, which actually had nothing to do with race, but had to do with age and thinking, is she going to have the chops? And she had the chops.
Oh.
Yeah. But it's so interesting. Like that does take us back to, people assume that I wrote the white character and Christine wrote
I bet. Yeah,
because so much of Riley and Jen, probably 75% of them, it's like being a woman in the world, being a sister, being a daughter, just trying to be.
But you guys did that beautifully. Let me just say that came through. Like I stopped thinking about my picture of them. I always like to picture the person.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Leslie's like, okay, ladies, you're over time. Yeah.
This is like the after hours Zoom now. People, we'll just stay on Zoom and people can watch us live all day.
Yeah, this is an amazing conversation, and I hate to cut it off, but we do have a 2:30 event. So, or 1:30, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. But it's been amazing to see you all. This was an amazing conversation. Thank you all for being here. Christine, Joe, Lee, we really appreciate your time. Thank you for being here, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
My Instagram's in the thing.
Keep writing.
About this stuff.